The spa door clicked behind Selene like a verdict, and eucalyptus steam curled as if the room exhaled her secrets. She stared at Kofi kneading towels, and her voice came out reckless. Selene said one night, 1 million, no strings. The words shook like crystal in a storm. Kofi blinked slow, then placed the towels in a perfect stack as if control could be folded. Kofi said, "You think money unknots what power tightened." Her chest burned as the boardroom sneers replayed. She wanted to buy silence, buy comfort, buy a moment that did not bruise. Selene said, "I am offering choice, not chains." He lifted his gaze, steady as bedrock, and the quiet disciplined her. Kofi said, "Choice without dignity is a purchase, not a promise." She felt 12 different versions of loneliness tug. Outside, rain ticked a metronome against glass. Selene said, "Say yes, and let me forget them." He shook his head and reached for oil. Kofi said, "I am not for sale, but I can help you breathe." Shame and relief fought in her mouth as thunder rolled like applause for a truth she had tried to outrun. Jade found Selene under the awning, rain stitching silver lines across the night while taxis hissed. Jade said, "What did you just do in there?" Selene laughed without music and wiped mascara with the heel of her hand. Selene said, "I tried to buy a feeling that won't stay bought." Jade's eyes scanned her like a scanner searching for fractures. Jade said, "You don't fix betrayal by renting a body." The word betrayal flashed like lightning. Selene remembered Carter's whisper in the boardroom and the smug smiles that followed. Selene said, "They cornered me, and I needed to feel like I could corner someone back." Jade's mouth softened, but her tone stayed iron. Jade said, "Power isn't balm, it is blade, and you keep pressing it to the same wound." Traffic splashed a rhythm that kept time with Selene's heart. She imagined walking back inside and asking for grace instead of purchase. Selene said, "He refused me with kindness, and I hated that it helped." Jade nodded, umbrella tilting to shield the last intact piece of Selene's pride. Kofi locked the spa in darkness and listened to the rain normalize the city. He walked past shuttered storefronts where pride and hunger learned to share a body. Kofi said, "Not tonight," to the part of him that wanted easy money. A memory opened like a bruise. Hospital monitors beeping in a room too bright for fear. He remembered a child's small hand in his palm, and the cold that stole options. Kofi said, "We lived because I chose wrong once." He reached his building, the kind that smelled like old paint and boiled beans. The mailbox gaped like a mouth ready to deliver bad news. Kofi said, "I will not let a costumed pity write my story." He climbed slow, counted each step like a vow. On the stoop, he checked his phone and saw no miracles, only the same spreadsheet of Odin dew. Kofi said, "Tomorrow I work and I breathe, and I stand where money cannot move me." The rain softened until it felt like mercy, thin and persistent. Carter watched the Sapier's exterior feed from his office, a penthouse aquarium of glass and indifference. Carter said, "So that is where your crown slipped." He zoomed until Selene's silhouette resolved against the rain. The satisfaction felt like a mint on poison. "Carter," said a purchased man, "to match your purchased votes." He phoned a fixer whose number lived where morals stop. Carter said, "I want a rumor packaged in velvet." The city glittered beneath him, obedient and small. He touched the board packet for next week and rehearsed the lines that would ruin her. Carter said, reckless, compromised, unfit. He liked how the words tasted like control. He killed the feed and faced his reflection, admiring a winner who never bled in public. Carter said, "Let her drown in whispers before she learns to swim." The rain traced elegant signatures down the window, notarizing his intent. Selene's phone vibrated while the rideshare idled, heater fogging the windows with stale hope. She opened the message and the world rearranged. A photo showed her entering the spa, timestamp bright as accusation. A caption promised exposure if she did not bow at the next vote. Selene said. Of course he would use a whisper when truth is louder. The driver glanced back, sensing a weather change that had nothing to do with rain. She could hear Jade warning her not to play their game on their board. Selene said, "They think fear is a leash, and I will wear it." Her thumb hovered over delete, then hovered over call. Selene said no more buying, no more hiding. She saved the evidence and felt the panic shave itself into purpose. The city slid by, indifferent and lit. Selene said, "If they want my crown, they will have to take it while I am awake." The car pulled into her building, and the storm finally sounded like applause. Selene sat on her couch, city lights blinking through wide windows, and Jade handed her a mug like it was armor. Jade said, "What wound are you really nursing?" Selene touched the rim and felt heat where none lingered in her chest. Selene said, "My mother scrubbed floors so I could sit in chairs. Men swore I'd never touch, and now those same men wait to watch me fall." Her voice carried pride and fatigue, a mix she hated. Jade leaned forward, eyes sharp. Jade said, "You are building kingdoms, but you never built a home inside yourself." Selene laughed brittle. Selene said, "Love was always too expensive, so I chose power instead." Jade's tone softened, but her truth didn't. Jade said, "If you confuse chains for comfort, you'll wear them forever." Silence stretched, only broken by the hum of traffic. Selene whispered, "Then what do I have left to fight with?" Kofi stood in a landlord's dim office, walls lined with files that smelled like dust and failed promises. The landlord tapped papers with a pen like each click stole seconds. Kofi said, "I just need a little more time. I swear the payment's coming." The landlord raised a brow, unimpressed but not cruel. The clock ticked above them, every second loud. Kofi said, "I'm not asking for favors, only space to finish what I started." He swallowed pride like it was glass. The landlord sighed, then scribbled a note on the ledger. The delay wasn't mercy, just business, but it bought days. Kofi pressed the signature with his eyes, as if it were salvation. He said, "I'll keep my word." Stepping out, the cool air struck, and his chest lifted with something fragile. He whispered, "I refuse to fold." Selene returned to the spa, her heels striking like apologies before her words did. Kofi glanced up from sanitizing bottles, still calm, still firm. "Selene said, I came back to say I crossed a line." Her voice cracked around the edges. Kofi set the bottle down and folded his arms, not defensive, but grounded. Kofi said, "Boundaries are the only thing that keep us breathing here." She exhaled, fighting the sting of pride. Selene said, "I didn't mean to belittle you." His gaze stayed steady, weighty. Kofi said, "Then don't repeat it." The air smelled of eucalyptus and tension. And he was sound more. For the first time, Selene looked less like a CEO, and more like a woman chasing her own forgiveness. She whispered, "Thank you for listening." Selene lay on the massage table, blazer off, vulnerability slipping through silk blouse. Kofi's hands worked with skill, pressure measured, rhythm steady. Selene said, "Why does this feel different?" He didn't look at her, only moved with intention. Kofi said, "Because this is not about money, it is about care." The words sank deeper than touch. Her throat tightened, and she wanted to confess a dozen buried aches. She whispered, "They see me as iron, but I am paper inside." He pressed between her shoulders, easing knots, and said softly, "Paper still carries truth. Don't mistake fragility for weakness." Her eyes blurred, but she blinked the tears away. In the parking garage, shadows swallowed the corners as Selene unlocked her car. A voice echoed, slick with menace. Carter said, "Funny place to shop for company, Selene." She froze, pulse pounding. Carter stepped into dim light, smirk polished. "Carter," said a CEO tangled with her masseur. "What a headline." Her spine stiffened as she met his gaze. Selene said, "If you think I scare easy, you've mistaken my silence for surrender." He circled like a predator, shoes echoing. Carter said, "Step down gracefully, or the world learns your secret." She gripped her keys like a blade, fury masking fear. Selene said, "Do your worst, but understand I will not kneel." The elevator hummed above them, indifferent to the war carved in whispers. Morning thinned the storm and sharpened resolve as Selene stood in the spa doorway with a folded invitation like a truce. Selene said, "Come to the gala as my wellness consultant." Kofi cleaned a bottle label until it shone like a thought made clear. Kofi said, "Why me when 100 polished men would nod for photographs?" She held his gaze and let sincerity outrun armor. Selene said, "Because you tell the truth even when I do not want it." He weighed pride against possibility and felt both resist. Kofi said, "If I come, it is to work, not to be paraded." She nodded once, the smallest bow a queen can make. Selene said, "Then help me remember what care feels like in a room built for spectacle." He breathed in eucalyptus and exhaled a quiet yes that sounded like a boundary and a beginning. The hotel ballroom opened like a gilded mouth, chandeliers glittering while donors floated on compliments and chilled prosecco. Selene said, "Walk with me and do not shrink." Kofi adjusted his cuff as if it were a shield forged from patience. Kofi said, "I carry my own room wherever I stand." A pair of executives measured him with smiles that bit. Selene's spine lengthened and the air around her steadied. "Selene," said, eyes forward, purpose louder. A reporter angled near, scenting a story in their proximity. Kofi said, "Let them taste rumor while we practice care." They moved through the crowd as if swimming against silk. Selene felt the old hunger for approval flicker and fade under his calm orbit. She whispered, "Do not let me barter my worth tonight." He nodded, a quiet anchor in a glittering tide. Carter arrived with an investor whose handshake felt like a test disguised as charm. "Carter," said Selene, "meet the man who believes wellness is a market, not a mission." The investor's smile slid toward Kofi like a scalpel. "Investor," said, "what qualifies you to advise beyond scented oils?" Kofi let the insult land and pass. Kofi said, "Breath, evidence, and outcomes that do not require applause." Selene felt a hush edge the circle, as if the chandelier dimmed to listen. Carter said, "So you sell calm to the desperate?" Kofi's eyes did not flinch. Kofi said, "No, I teach bodies to hear themselves when money is loud." The investor blinked, recalibrating. Selene said, "Our returns are measured in lives steadied, then profits follow." The circle resumed breathing, while Carter chewed a smile that would not stay. They slipped onto a balcony where night air rinsed the perfume and pretense from their lungs. City lights pulsed like distant drums, and the moon hung indifferent. "Selene," said without the armor, "I am too easy to bruise." Kofi leaned on the rail and studied the street far below. Kofi said, "Soft is not weak, it is honest, and honest is hard when rooms demand masks." She let the confession loosen her jaw. Selene said, "I fear love will make me small." He turned, voice low. Kofi said, "Real love makes room, not cages." Silence settled warm rather than cold. She almost reached for his hand, then gripped the railing instead. Selene said, "Teach me to stand without trading myself." He nodded once, vow-sized and quiet. The flash hit like lightning, and suddenly the balcony was not sanctuary but stage. A photographer leaned from a service stair, hunger bright in his lens. Selene said back inside, "Now." Kofi pivoted, placing himself between her and the glare without ceremony. Carter's laugh traveled through the ballroom, as if summoned by headlines. Carter said, "Careful, Selene, the city loves a priced romance." Security surged too late, and the camera vanished into the crowd like a rumor with feet. Kofi said, "They will write what pays." Selene steadied her breath and gathered her posture like armor reclaimed. Selene said, "Then we will answer with truth, not panic." He nodded, accepting a war he had not chosen but would not flee. The night kept glittering, cruel, and beautiful. Marcus stepped from a black sedan outside Selene's office, his presence like perfume that once comforted and now poisoned. He walked in uninvited, charm sharpened like a blade. Marcus said, "You are bleeding in headlines, Selene, and I can stop it." She stiffened, memories clawing back of his smile when he left her empty. "Selene," said, "you sold my trust before. Why offer repair now?" He leaned closer, voice velvet. Marcus said, "Because I know things about your new companion, things that would crush your empire faster than whispers." Her eyes narrowed, heat and frost in one look. Selene said, "You're here to trade secrets for relevance." He smirked, sipping water he hadn't been offered. Marcus said, "Think of it as leverage, sweetheart." Her silence rang like warning bells across glass walls. Jade hunched over her laptop in Selene's loft, glow from the screen tracing worry lines across her face. She whispered, "Sealed court records, Kofi's name tied to theft." The cursor blinked like judgment. Her chest ached with conflict. Jade said, "Do I protect her from heartbreak, or destroy what might heal her?" Rain tapped rhythm on the windows, the city complicit in secrets. She scrolled, each detail cutting deeper, a narrative heavy with sacrifice disguised as crime. Jade said, "This truth won't keep quiet." Yet her fingers froze, loyalty binding her hands. Silence wrapped her like a verdict as she closed the file without sending. In a cramped kitchen lit by one buzzing bulb, Kofi slid a thick envelope across a chipped table to his landlord. Kofi said, "The rest will come, I promise." He thought of his sister's child, medicine receipts like scars in a drawer. His eyes landed on a worn photo taped near the fridge, a laughing girl holding a toddler. He whispered, "I'll never let you carry my burden." His chest clenched at the memory of sirens and desperation. Kofi said, "I took the fall because survival doesn't wait for paperwork." The landlord muttered something about interest, but Kofi had already walked back into the hall, determination louder than death. Selene cornered Kofi outside the spa, voice trembling but edged. "Selene," said, "I found records sealed, but there. Tell me what you've hidden." Kofi's jaw flexed, silence heavier than denial. Finally, he said, "It's not my story to parade for tabloids." Her breath caught, anger battling fear. "Selene," said, "secrets grow teeth when buried." He met her eyes, gaze steady. Kofi said, "Some truths belong to the living they protected." The air thickened with unsaid questions. She wanted to believe him, yet suspicion bruised her ribs. Selene whispered, "Trust is all I ask." His silence answered, in ways louder than words. Marcus struck first, releasing a polished dossier to reporters with Kofi's mugshot and words twisted into scandal. The headlines screamed theft, omission, betrayal. Selene read it in her office, each line carving trust into fragments. Marcus said to a camera, "A CEO blinded by desire gambles her company's dignity on a criminal." Selene's knees weakened, yet fury ignited. Selene said, "He saved lives and you weaponize it for spectacle." Phones buzzed, investors called, the empire shook. She stared out the window, storm clouds gathering again. Selene whispered, "This will not break me, but it will change everything." Selene stormed into Kofi's apartment, rain dripping from her coat like fury turned liquid. She slammed the door shut, voice trembling but sharp. Selene said, "You let me believe in something while hiding the blade." Kofi stood by the window, arms crossed, face shadowed by city glow. Kofi said, "And you tried to buy me like property." Their words collided in the stale air, louder than thunder outside. She pointed to the dossier still open on her phone. Selene said, "The world is tearing me apart because of your silence." His jaw clenched as he stepped closer. Kofi said, "I protected them, not me. If I am guilty, it is of sacrifice, not deceit." For a heartbeat, rage and grief blurred until her hands shook with both. Selene whispered, "Then why does it still feel like betrayal?" Kofi finally broke, voice raw like gravel dragged across truth. Kofi said, "The child is my sister's little girl. Insurance turned us away. Medicine was locked behind numbers we couldn't reach." He swallowed, shame and pride at war. Kofi said, I stole what kept her breathing. I would do it again, no matter the price they stamp on my name. Selene's chest tightened, anger dissolving into ache. She touched the photo taped near his fridge, a child's smile too bright to be shadowed. Selene said, You carried this alone while I doubted your worth. Tears rimmed her lashes, not of pity, but of recognition. He whispered, I never lied about who I am, only about what I chose to endure. The silence after was heavy but holy. The boardroom was marble and steel, a temple of power where Carter sharpened words like knives. Carter said, Our CEO compromised judgment for scandal, aligning with a criminal. Murmurs rippled, eyes darting at Selene like vultures circling. She sat tall, though her pulse thundered. Carter pushed a vote for removal, his smirk rehearsed for victory. Selene's knuckles whitened on the table, but her voice cut through the noise. Selene said, You call him criminal while hiding your own corruption. The room gasped, tension cracking like glass. Carter's face hardened, fury slipping through control. Selene added, If I am guilty of anything, it is refusing to trade love for fear. Silence followed, heavy as judgment. In Selene's loft, Jade confronted her with fierce honesty. Jade said, You are fighting on their stage with their weapons. Stop before you bleed out for nothing. Selene paced glass of wine untouched, fury mixing with doubt. Selene said, If I walk away, I lose everything I built. Jade stepped closer, voice steady. Jade said, If you stay chained to power, you'll lose yourself instead. Silence trembled between them. Selene stared out at the skyline, lights flickering like uncertain promises. She whispered, Then what do I fight with now? Jade's hand touched her shoulder, grounding her. Jade said, Fight with truth. It's the one thing they cannot buy or bury. Selene burst into the boardroom mid-session, eyes alight with storm and fire. She didn't wait for permission. Selene said, I will not cower beneath your threats. Carter sneered, but she pressed on, voice ringing. Selene said, You think dignity is yours to grant, but I reclaim it with truth. She pointed at Carter, hands steady. Selene said he blackmailed me with rumors, leaked lies through Marcus, and calls it leadership. Gasps sliced the silence. Carter rose, fists tight, but his mask cracked. Selene stood taller, pulse steady. Selene said, If you vote me out, let it be for my honesty, not your deception. The storm outside roared like applause as the board sat stunned, caught between her fire and his ruin. The board reconvened under skies the color of steel, and silence sat like a witness between nameplates. The chair cleared his throat, then announced an inquiry into leaks and coercion. Carter said, This is procedural theater, but his smile lagged. An auditor slid folders forward, paper whispering like tide. Selene said, Let the facts breathe in daylight. A director adjusted pearls and asked about payments routed through a shell vendor. Carter said, Standard Consulting, and the room flinched at the word standard. The auditor mapped transfers to Marcus with a red thread of numbers. Holy wordy, Selene said, Blackmail is not governance. Murmurs cracked the varnish of certainty. A vote delayed her removal, and the chair tapped the gavel as if freeing oxygen. Selene exhaled, and did not look at Carter. She said, Truth will keep speaking even when we leave this room. The storm outside finally broke, clean and cold. Selene arrived at a modest apartment where a wind chime sang resilience at the door. Kofi opened with surprise and relief braided together. His sister waved them in, a gentle authority moving through cramped rooms. Selene said, I came to apologize in person. The child barreled from a hallway with crayons, and a grin that disarmed shame. Kofi said, You do not owe performance, only honesty. Selene crouched to the child's height, and offered a smile unarmored. She said, I made a mistake because I was afraid. The sister poured tea and set out biscuits like blessings. The child held up a drawing of a sun with too many rays. Kofi said, She always gives the light more space than it needs. Laughter loosened the knots that headlines had tightened. Selene whispered, "Thank you for letting me stand here without titles." The apartment answered, with quiet belonging. Evening found them on the stoop, city humming like a lullaby stitched from buses and hope. Selene said, "I wanted to own what could only be given." Kofi watched a streetlight blink and then steady, as if choosing to stay. Kofi said, "I wanted you before the offer, and I hated that truth." She winced, then breathed through it as through pain that heals. Selene said, "Can we begin without pretending the scar is not there?" He nodded, a promise measured in quiet. Kofi said, "Slow, honest, no price tags, no disguises." She almost reached for his hand then did, and he did not move away. Selene said, "I will not negotiate tenderness with fear again." A neighbor dragged a trash bin across concrete like a drum roll for ordinary life. Kofi said, "We can build something that fits our actual names." The night agreed, soft and present. Screens lit the loft like a command center as Jade traced payments across jurisdictions with the patience of a surgeon. Jade said, "Shell company here, a dummy invoice there, and Marcus caches the echo." Selene captured screenshots and labeled every thread. Selene said, "We publish facts, not fury." A journalist answered their email faster than luck, asking for corroboration and context. Jade said, "We have both, plus motive." They cross-checked dates until the timeline clicked into truth. Selene drafted a statement that named intimidation without venom. Selene said, "We do not need to scorch the earth to grow something new." Jade smiled, pride and worry braided. Jade said, "Get ready for the blast wave." They hit send, and the silence that followed felt like wind before rain. Across town, someone would read and finally see. The city held its breath with them. At a community center that smelled like fresh paint and second chances, Selene outlined a wellness fund that would seed clinics where insurance forgot streets. Leaders from the block filled folding chairs with skeptical hope. Selene said, "No branding first, only care first." Kofi stood beside her, not as symbol, but as partner in practice. Kofi said, "We will hire from here, train here, and listen here." A nurse raised a hand and asked about costs that crush patients. Selene said, "Sliding scale, grants, and a line in our corporate budget that does not vanish when profits dip." Applause grew like a tide that wanted to believe. She announced the first clinic in Kofi's neighborhood, doors opening soon. Kofi said, "This time, medicine will be a door, not a wall." The room warmed with yes, and the past loosened its grip. Carter's resignation email landed like a grenade disguised as a whisper. The press leaked it within minutes, headlines spitting disgrace. Carter said, "I step aside to protect the company," though everyone knew it was survival, not sacrifice. Marcus tried to pivot, posting a half-apology video where regret and arrogance wrestled in every smirk. Selene read both statements with a steady breath, no satisfaction, only the quiet justice of rot exposed. Jade said, "The wolves eat their own when the mask falls." Selene closed her laptop and said, "Let them gnaw. We have work beyond their hunger." The empire had cracked, but for once it cracked toward light. The press hall buzzed with cameras flashing like lightning storms. Selene stepped to the podium, spine unbent, breath steady. She said, "I offered a man $1 million for one night. That was my weakness, my fear." Gasps fluttered like startled birds. She leaned closer to the mic, eyes unwavering. Selene said, "I have learned that love cannot be purchased, only honored. I refuse to hide my mistakes, because truth is leadership." The reporters scribbled, torn between scandal and respect. One asked if she feared the board's wrath. Selene smiled sharp. Selene said, "I fear silence more than judgment." Applause erupted from unexpected corners, and flashbulbs recorded a queen stripped of pretense but not power. From the back of the hall, Kofi watched her voice carve silence into courage. His chest tightened, pride mixing with awe. The crowd blurred around him, but her words pulled him into focus. Selene's eyes lifted mid-sentence and caught his across the distance. He didn't wave, didn't call, only let his gaze hold hers like a vow without noise. She breathed easier, shoulders loosening as if his presence anchored her. Kofi whispered, "She doesn't need me to fight, but she knows I'll never leave the edge of the battlefield." The applause roared louder, but the real thunder was the look they shared. Later, in the hush of an empty corridor, Selene leaned against the wall, heels clicking off marble as Kofi approached. Her voice cracked softer now. "Selene said, one night was never what I wanted." He stopped close, scent of rain still clinging to his jacket. Kofi said, "Then stop counting. Nights turn into days, days into something we can't price." Her hand trembled as she reached, and his palm met hers with certainty. For the first time, she let herself breathe without armor. Selene whispered, "Stay, not because I ask, but because you want to." He smiled, eyes warm. Kofi said, "I already chose." The clinic doors opened on a bright Saturday, balloons bobbing against a clean sky. Families poured in, faces cautious but hopeful. Selene stood at the entrance, ribbon scissors in hand, and Kofi beside her, steady as ever. She whispered for him alone, "Your secret didn't ruin me. It taught me how to love without fear." The ribbon snapped, applause swelling like a tide washing pain into purpose. Inside, walls smelled of fresh paint, exam rooms ready, laughter spilling already. Selene felt the weight of empire lift, replaced by roots planted in soil that mattered. The noise of cameras and donors faded behind her. What lingered was Kofi's hand at her back, and the echo of a truth that would outlast scandal.